I draw attention to my housing and property interests as on the register. My Lords, this second reading debate provides an opportunity to review the current state of the PRS, the private rented sector, and to consider the impact on this sector of the Renters Reform Bill. Does the bill address the key problems facing renters, and if so, will it fix those problems? A quick look at the private rented sector today. By the late 1980s, the PRS accounted for only some 9% of the nation's homes. Then in the early years of this century, the sector dramatically doubled in size to around 20% of the stock, and it achieved this growth without building virtually any new homes. Two factors propelled this extraordinary turnaround. First, the Housing Act 1988 removed rent controls and security of tenure for new short-hold lettings. This created a profitable opportunity, enhanced by low-interest buy-to-let mortgages for investors. Today there are 2.3 million private landlords. 2.3 million private landlords. Despite tax and regulatory changes to dampen this phenomenon, and the recent interest rate hikes, the PRS has continued to sustain its newfound size, bolstered by the shortages that have pushed up prices and rents. The second big change, which has led to today's dependency on the PRS, was the demise of council house building. At its peak, local councils regularly accounted for some 150 to 200,000 new homes built in a single year. The housing associations have only ever built a fraction of these numbers. Along with council house sales under the right to buy, now approaching 2 million homes sold, the social housing sector, that is, councils plus housing associations, has suffered a huge decline from around 34% of the country's housing stock to just 17% today. Those who would have looked to the social housing sector in the past must now turn to private renting instead. Has this switch from social housing to private renting been a success? Although the PRS rents are higher and security is lower, the PRS has provided a satisfactory home for many. But the switch has not helped with the nation's biggest housing problem, supply. There are simply not enough homes to go round. Building new homes has not kept pace with increases in households. And PRS landlords do not build new homes, with the exception of a valuable but modest program of build-to-rent and purpose-built student accommodation. Rather, private landlords have inevitably outbid others, particularly first-time buyers, to acquire existing properties, which, critics argue, has inflated house prices and led directly to reduced numbers able to become homeowners. We are left with acute housing shortages, which only a big expansion of social housing can fix. However, the bill does try to address other serious criticisms of the private rented sector. These criticisms are, put simply, that landlords can, and some do, take advantage of the acute housing shortages and lack of options, that the power imbalance between landlord and tenant means renters have had to put up with rents that absorb half their incomes, with poor conditions and appalling service, all because they have nowhere else to go. And underpinning this imbalance is the constant threat, whether articulated or not, of retaliatory eviction, whereby the landlord can get rid of a complaining tenant through the notorious Section 21 no-fault eviction route. Now, the bill takes some important steps to correct the landlord-tenant imbalance. It does not have much to say about affordability of rents, because it is a fundamental characteristic of a private rented sector that rents are set by the market. As economists frequently tell us, tough rent controls could lead to an exodus of landlords, while a gentle reduction in the size of an overextended PRS could rebalance the sectors. Too many landlords exiting the market at the same time because of controls on rents, would create chaos. However, the bill does seek to block rent increases in excess of market levels to stymie an underhand way of forcing a tenant out when no legitimate grounds exist. On other matters, the bill has some valuable ingredients. Landlords will have to meet a set of decent standards, which will be established to address poor conditions like cold and mould. Renters will all have access to a new ombudsman who will handle complaints and will be able to levy quite serious fines for incompetence and bad behaviour. As in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, a register available online, a property portal, will be maintained of all PRS properties covering their compliance with legal requirements to enable prospective tenants to check for health and safety features, etc. The bill will also make it more difficult for landlords to refuse a tenancy for those with a pet. All these changes empower tenants in helpful ways. But A, there are modest changes that your Lordship's scrutiny may achieve to amend the bill for the better. B, there is a desperate need for energetic enforcement. And C, renters do need a good online advice service to explain all their rights and responsibilities. And there is one being developed by the TDS Charitable Foundation, I see. However, a cloud hangs over what was the centrepiece of the bill, the fundamental issue of renters' security, their consumer protection against arbitrary evictions. As well as particular concerns about lettings to students, there are at least 3 further issues here. First, new grounds for possession will allow landlords to get the property back for a family member's occupation or their own, or because the landlord is selling. This means, perhaps inevitably, that any private sector tenant could still be evicted through no fault of their own. This is an understandable grounds for repossession because a sector based on private investment has to enable the investor to sell up at some point. But could this change be made less sudden, less painful? Second, new measures to speed up the gaining of possession in arrears cases introduces some very tough changes that may have gone a step too far. This needs exploring. And third, the biggest problem of the bill is not one of content, but of implementation. The all-important ending of no-fault Section 21 evictions is now to be delayed until such time as the Lord Chancellor reports that the county courts are likely to process cases speedily. This could take a long time, and with no fixed date, no backstop for triggering the end of Section 21, the central point, the central plank of this bill is missing. To conclude, the doubling of the size of the private rented sector and halving of the social housing sector has exacerbated shortages and led to some cases of poor performance and exploitation of tenants. The Renters Reform Bill introduces some very welcome measures for which government deserves full credit to redress the landlord-tenant imbalance. But last-minute government amendments to delay the ending of no-fault evictions for an indefinite period has led to anger and frustration from tenants' representatives like Generation Rent and the Renters Reform Coalition. Perhaps the noble Baroness, the Minister, can head off a Lord's rebellion on this issue by indicating a willingness to address this concern alongside more modest changes to a bill that is worth having but could be much better.
Yeah.